Thank you, Chairman, and honorable colleagues and fellow environmentalists. First, I'd like to address a bill by our colleague, Representative Newberry, that's on your calendar, 5612. And when you look at the bill, it appears to be striking that entire section, and it appears that way because that's what it's doing. And the reason why is since its inception in 2011, it has never met once. It has never produced one report, nor has it requested one bit of information. So I think it's probably fair to say that it's not necessary to keep it on the books anymore. Happy to entertain any questions on that.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Really?
Yes, Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Leader. I am personally frustrated when we pass bills and nothing happens. So
Yes.
I'm glad to see this. But of all, you may not know the answer to this. I may have to ask the sponsor himself. But of all the laws that we've passed that are not being enforced, and I have a list, and I'll add this to it, why this one?
As you alluded, I may not be able to answer this question. Thank you.
From what I picked up from Leader Newberry was that he has been looking at this bill for quite a while. I guess it's been on the books for a while.
It's
And
2011,
just sitting
yeah.
there, so he got tired of seeing it, so he wants to get rid of it. Clean up the books, he called it. Okay, that concludes. Oh, go right ahead, Representative Boylan. I didn't see you.
I'm not sure if you'll know the answer to this, but I believe biofuels are blended with delivered fuels, home heating oil. It's some low percentage, 5%, 10%, something of that nature. Would striking this bill has nothing to do with that?
Right, yeah, it has no impact
As law.
on the biofuels, the way we use them, the way they're regulated. It was just this commission.
Just the commission,
Yeah.
thank you.
May I proceed, Chairman?
1 minute. Lou, we'd like to recognize Chairwoman McEntee, and would you like to be voted in positive on?
Yes, and Lou, I want my vote declared in the affirmative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go right ahead, Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. The next bill before you is going to be 5609. 5609 is requesting an environmental impact study of motor vehicle non-exhaust particle emissions. Now, you all saw that we received, just moments before the hearing, a letter from the RIDOT regarding this bill and their concerns. And as I struggle to locate that letter, which I guess is really irrelevant, their concerns were that they weren't sure what the cost would be of this. This bill, which I'm going to explain in detail, would very easily be able to be achieved, oh, thank you so much, through the EC4, which, as you know, is the governing agency charged with implementing the Act on Climate. And furthermore, the EC4 has no restrictions as it pertains to cost. Their charge was to disregard cost and do what has to be done in order to implement it. So if DOT is going to claim that they don't know how much it's going to cost, then I can simply amend the bill to go to the EC4, and then it doesn't matter what it costs. So that should hopefully address DOT's letter. What are non-exhaust emissions? This is something that I came upon at a conference. I think it was actually here in Newport with the State Legislative Leaders Foundation on renewable energy and on pollution. As you know, we've come a long way in reducing tailpipe emissions through various EPA standards. We've come a long way from leaded gas in the 70s up to what are vehicles that produce a lot less tailpipe emissions. However, one overlooked area, and again I found it to be fascinating, was this non-exhaust emissions. This is a hidden pollution, and it is coming from internal combustion engines, motor vehicles that run with internal combustion engines, as well as electric vehicles. They don't have tailpipes, obviously, but they're still, because they're heavier, 20 to 50% heavier than a standard counterpart, internal combustion counterpart, their impact is even a little bit higher. So what are these? These are emissions that come from the wear of the tires of vehicles as they go over the roadway, the wear of the roadway itself, the wear of the brake pads on the cars. These create dust. We all know that when we clean our car, that our wheels have that dust all around them. That's micro fragments of metals, of toxins, of things that are constantly being released from our vehicles. There are health hazards that are involved with these fine particulates that are emitted, and they include lung disease, cardiovascular disorders, cancer, and cognitive decline. The tire particles contain microplastics, which is something that we all in various committees throughout this building are dealing with right now, or working to deal with right now. Additionally, they emit heavy metals, and the synthetic rubber compounds will also be released into the air, soil, and the water systems. The brake systems release copper, iron, asbestos, and other toxic metals that also further degrade air quality and water quality. The environmental damage from the road dust and tire particles come when it washes into the rivers and into the oceans. And as you can imagine, a state 45 miles by 35 miles with 400 miles of coastline, we really have to be concerned about what gets into our oceans. It certainly pollutes water, and in doing so harms the delicate ecosystems in the aquatic environments, fish, flora, and other living things. The microplastic from the tires are one of the largest sources of oceanic plastic pollution right now. And I know that we're focusing on this in the Bottle Bill Commission. Microplastics are a big issue that we're just really starting to get serious about globally. The tire and road wear particles contribute to black carbon accumulation. That's what I was talking about in your tires. And it just is constantly released every time our cars go over bumps and continue to make these fine particles. Why would an environmental impact study be needed? It's a policy blind spot. It's something we really haven't been addressing in all of our other environmental efforts. I don't think it's necessarily a new issue. It's just that we've gotten so good with our tailpipe emissions that we aren't really focusing on these other areas. And this is an area that a study would help us to understand better. Certainly the urban air quality is something we deal with frequently in the building, and this would help to mitigate that. It would also lend information for sustainable materials development, where we could potentially look at tire material replacements, brake pad material replacements that aren't as offensive to the delicate ecosystems. And it could help us develop better road materials. It's truly a green mobility solution because we're tackling it as a problem from motor vehicles and road wear, as opposed to this motor vehicle versus that motor vehicle. I really breezed over a lot of stuff, so I'll be happy to take questions if there are any on this bill. Okay. Okay, great. So the next bill is House 5610, which doesn't really have a title, but it's relating to the Act on Climate. What it does is it adds one small section, Section 10, which is very plainly stated: evaluate and make recommendations for the use of carbon emissions removal technology as an alternative approach to reducing carbon emissions and meeting the climate goals as set forth in this chapter, which is the Act on Climate. This would charge the EC4 with this responsibility. Can the EC4 do it right now? I found nothing in the bill that would preclude them from doing it, but it would be great if it were mandated, in my humble opinion. So why am I proposing this amendment, and why do I believe it's a good idea? We want to look at reducing CO2 in the environment, right? That's what the Act on Climate was about. And so the Act seeks to slow and gradually eliminate the production of the CO2. This comes at it from a different angle. I believe I also learned about this at the same conference on the environment. Comes at it from the different side, where it's not only the reduction on this end is happening, but this is eating up carbon that is already being or still being produced and already in existence. It bridges that gap between both ends of that spectrum. While we're getting rid of it on one hand, we'll also be taking it out of the environment by removing it with technologies that are currently available. And frankly, I think they're a great opportunity for a state like Rhode Island to seize on. We know that we'll never eliminate all carbon emissions, particularly when it pertains to heavy industry, aviation, and agriculture. They'll always exist, so we should try to eliminate the carbon from the environment. This obviously enhances climate resiliency and flexibility, which is in keeping with the Act, and it's a more flexible and diversified approach to capture and store the carbon from the atmosphere. It's an emerging industry, and this is where I think as a state, we're uniquely positioned, again, because of our size, to potentially be a leader. We can create an industry around this topic, this idea, and embracing technologies that other states are doing successfully, and that we should as well. Can you imagine Rhode Island companies being able to get federal money, state monies towards creating this industry born here, raised here, that we can propagate throughout the entire U.S., who has similar goals to our Act on Climate in various forms? What are some of the existing carbon emissions removal technologies? I am going to breeze through these because I can tell, even though I'm not looking at you, you're sick of hearing me talk already. Direct air capture. This extracts CO2 from the atmosphere. There's a Swiss company called Climeworks, and a Canadian company called Carbon Engineering, and they are pioneering this technology. It is beyond the proof of concept. It is actually being employed, and it allows the scalable CO2 reductions to be located where they need to be located, which would be where the CO2 is being created, as I said earlier, farming, heavy equipment, etc. There's bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. This involves growing biomass, trees, crops, algae, things of that nature. We burn it for energy, which is a plus. It's clean energy. And we're able to capture and store the resulting CO2 at the same time. The pros of this, it generates renewable energy. That's great. And it removes CO2. That's outstanding as well. It does require a little bit of land area, but as I said earlier, agriculture and heavy equipment and whatnot is being done where there is land area. Enhanced weathering. This uses minerals like olivine and basalt to accelerate the natural process of carbon absorption from the atmosphere. The pros are it's a permanent sequestration of CO2. It's a one and done deal. The cons would be that it's still early in its research stages. There has been some proof of concept on a minor scale, but it is still emerging. Soil, carbon sequestration, and regenerative agriculture. It improves farming practices to increase the carbon stored in soil through cover crops, reduced tillage, and composting. The pros are it benefits soil health and biodiversity, and obviously eliminates CO2. Ocean-based carbon removal, kelp farming. Now, we're farming the heck out of shellfish in Rhode Island. Wouldn't it be fantastic to expand our offshore farming as our terrestrial farms continue to shrink and disappear? Afforestation and reforestation, obviously, this is something you guys hear me yakking about all the time. I'm a tree lover, and I hate to see them getting cut down, and I love to see them being planted. That is self-explanatory. We know that no living organism eliminates more CO2 than a tree from the environment. So why not plant more and stop cutting down so darn many? Would it be appropriate to take questions now? Okay.
Representative Carlson.
Thank you very much. I have a question on, one on each bill. So the first bill around the, I got to go back and look at it again. You
Yeah, the non-
measuring the waste from other sources, roads,
Yeah.
tires, other parts of cars. Now, you said road wear was one of the, you suggested that road wear was one of the things to look at. Would
Yes.
you also consider looking at salt on the road?
So that's
Actually,
interesting.
I actually got a phone call just the other day about salt and all the salt that's on the road and how it runs into water, and I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. While I don't know if salt is viewed necessarily as a non-emissions pollutant, we have all been getting a lot of calls because in addition to salt, there's been this brining, which is the pre-treatment of the roads, and apparently that is creating some issues with vehicles and with some other things. How it ties in, Representative Carson, to this proposal is less clear to me, but I don't see any reason why under the construct of the legislation, it too could not be reviewed.
And my second question is around the carbon removal systems. I know that you may not be further down the pike, but do you know how if these things were created and if these things were functioning, who pays for it?
So in my hopeful attitude earlier when I was saying this could become an industry for us, the same people who pay for any emerging industry do. Bold people with means who are willing to risk
I mean
their
more
secret
ongoing.
fortunes.
Okay, so the investment part I get. You get people to
Yep.
put an investment together and you demonstrate you could run it. But now this big machine is running someplace. Do consumers pay for that? Like, how do we maintain this thing running? That's the question I'm asking.
Largely, it would be through the state would engage, or the feds and the state would engage these companies to use these technologies. There could also be, like we do with the Act on Climate on other things, incentives put into the marketplace so that if you produce so much, whether you're a heavy equipment company or a farm, you would then be required, or you would get an offset in your taxes if we do this frequently with our net metering stuff. There is always a way to incentivize people to engage these sorts of new technologies, particularly new technologies.
Thank you, Chairman. Leader, thank you for bringing these subjects forward. First of all, there's really interesting to attack these. The question I have is on 5609.
Yes.
Twofold question. Have you contacted the DEM and DOT about the study to say that you wanted them to perform one? Number one. And number two, the time frame you have in here is they have to do the reports by January 1st of next year. Is there enough time to be able to have them do these studies, aggregate all of the responses, and then?
Clearly not. In the proposal I had sent out for drafting, I never anticipated a date, and I think that probably was just a standard. Obviously, that would have to change. To your first question, I chose DOT and DEM, I think for obvious reasons. One is dealing with transportation, right? And the other one is dealing with the environment. DOT, as I said earlier, offered a letter expressing concerns because they didn't know the cost, and I have no particular affinity towards sticking with DOT or anyone else who doesn't want to be involved. As I said earlier, I would amend this in a minute to put it under the EC4, and at that point, no one really has a choice. They have to do it.
Okay. But you haven't talked to them about whether they have the ability to do it? Because I'm looking at DOT and DEM, and I said, this is getting to be their busy time.
Sure.
DOT redoing all the roads, DEM with all the oceans and rivers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering, time frame in that is.
As far as the time frame goes, I stipulate that was a ridiculous date. It wasn't even really considered by me. I don't know that 2 years would be enough for a comprehensive study to be conducted. But if we don't start now, And as we heard earlier, you guys voted on extending a bill's time for a commission. We realize that from time to time, we engage in endeavors that require more work than we may have anticipated. So by any means, we could just continue to extend it if we felt it was a good enough idea. We can say, well, it's, we don't know how much it's going to cost, and we don't know how long it's going to take, but those are excuses to not look at new emerging ways of attacking the problem that this body has made it very clear we want to attack.
And there's just one final comment too. Looking at some of the areas that you want to have the study done on, being in the automotive industry for 27 years, some of this seems to be very, how are we going to have brake pads that are supposed to wear to be able to stop the vehicles? If we have brake pads that don't wear, then we seem to be going to have more accidents or something.
We've all heard and are very familiar with the expression, need is the mother of all invention, right? There's never been a need, I guess. You can continue to create brake pads out of cheaper materials and sell them at a lower price, or maybe you can invest in looking at new technologies. If there's never been a need to change that because we've been okay as a society with all the crap that it pollutes into the environment, then why would they change? They have a good workable solution that they're tooled up for, they know the materials. If we're going to look into alternatives, which the entire Act on Climate is doing exactly that, it's shifting us from things that have worked for decades over to things that are emerging technologies. So this is in complete keeping with the spirit of the law, and it's in complete keeping with how the law is administered.
Representative Santucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. About 20 years ago, I took a URI Master Gardener course, and a few of the things that Leader Chippendale is talking about in 5609 may be able to be addressed immediately through URI. In fact, things like rain gardens that utilize plants like goldenrod can actually soak up particulates. So even if we can't get an entire study done right now, I think reaching out to URI will be a great first step to get the process going. It's not going to cost us anything. Those plants are readily available. They're very, very cheap, and that can be handled expediently. So I would recommend that we reach out to URI.
I appreciate Rep. Santucci's comment, because it does indicate that there are simple things that we can do right now, even without laws being passed. But in the context of the law, we can even go further. Does it require a little bit of effort? Yeah, sure. You have to know the different species that do this. You have to engage in certain practices. I haven't removed a piece of organic matter from my property in over 30 years because I compost everything. Nothing leaves my property. It's not hard to do, and that's another example of how we do it.
Any other questions? Yes, Dr. Speakman.
Thank you, Chair. Leader, it's great to see that you're considering looking at carbon sequestration and other things. I wonder if you might consider a word change in line 15 from an alternative to additional approach?
Of course, yeah. I'm no pride of authorship. If it's making it better and it's making it more workable, I will absolutely change wording until the cows come home.
Thank you.
Representative Boylan.
Thank you. I have a question about the motor vehicle non-exhaust particle emissions. There seems to be a large body of research that's already been done on this topic. Lots of research papers. I saw research out of California. Are you visualizing sort of a literature review of the existing studies that have been done, or primary research to supplement the research that's been done?
I think both can exist simultaneously. So the means through which I learned of these things was because there are people who have studied it. There are other states who are looking and or doing things to address these. we have a really great university in URI, not to mention all of the other wonderful universities here that can do research on a very high level into maybe developing newer technologies that will address these issues or newer ways. This is something that, like all worthwhile ventures, can never be researched enough. We're always learning more about whatever it is we're talking about. So I don't think there's ever a point when you can say, okay, research is done. So I think they can coexist, Representative.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Leader, it's always a pleasure to have you in front of us, and I never get tired of hearing you talk.
Well, all right, thank you. I appreciate that.